they also did really strange techniques to get the bloom and the glow of the lights that you see on the movie. And so the way they did it was they went with these 35 millimeter cameras, because it wasn't digital, it was real film. They were taking photos in the street, and they would go to these really warm rooms, stay there with the lens, and then walk right out on a cold night, so the lens would fog up. And so the lens would completely fog up because of the temperature, which is one of the worst things you can do on lenses. But they did it in purpose, just so it can fog up a lot. And then they waited for it to all fully fog up, took a bunch of pictures, and then they actually went and actually used some of the glows and some of the flares they got from the glows and actually painted them and superimposed them on top of the paintings. And so some of them are actually real photography elements that they've actually painted and sometimes even just merged into the painting that they were making in the backgrounds. Welcome to the Visual Effects Notes Podcast. Today's episode is sponsored by Action VFX and their brand new Introduction to Comfy UI for VFX course.
Become the compositor studios can't afford to replace. Easily harness the full power of Comfy UI using Action VFX's Introduction to Comfy UI for VFX course. Taught by Doug Hogan, a VFX artist with 18 years of VFX experience and countless credits within the VFX industry. Within this course, you'll learn how to install Comfy UI, quickly generate clean plates, create utility passes, speed up set extensions, create 3D models from images, and so much more. You'll also get free EXR footage, workflows, and cheat sheets. So visit actionvfx.com to sign up today and become the compositor studios want to hire.
And we have a special treat for the Visual Effects Notes podcast listeners. Use the code COMFY10VFX to get an exclusive 10% discount for this course. And now on to the show.
Hi everyone, welcome to the VFX Notes Podcast. I'm Ian Fales from Befores and Afters, and as always, I'm joined by Hugo Guerra from Hugo's Desk. Hi Hugo, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
Good, I'm really excited about today's episode. This is part of our season of the rise of AI robots, and we're going to be talking about the original Ghost in the Shell and the absolutely horrific remake as live action from 2017.
Oh man, I would hit you now if you were next to me. Oh my God. I know. I know everyone hates that film. I know. I'm probably the only one that likes that film.
I'm being provocative. I don't hate the 2017 film, but I barely can believe that's what they did as a live action version of the seminal Ghost in the Shell.
Yeah.
Right? We're being hit by so many live action or animated remakes of live action, vice versa. And I think we know what works and we know what doesn't work. And this one didn't work. Anyway, we'll totally get into that. But really, really cool to continue this season of Rise of the AI Robots with something a little bit different, which is animation.
Yeah.
And anime, right?
Yeah, but I'm super happy that we're going to talk about this film because I think from, I might have a different opinion, but I kind of feel that this is probably one of the most topical films of our entire collection because this film is like the one that shows everything, it shows cybernetic enhancements, it shows AI, it shows like robots, pure robots, cyborgs, it shows the web, wireless, the cloud, all those concepts that are so connected now with these topics and AI and the rise of robots. And I think this film, which is such an old film as well, it's from 95. It's unbelievable how old it is now.
Yeah.
It's 30 years old. I'm really, this film has a really special place in my heart. And so I'm really happy that we're talking about it. Yeah.
Yes, and just to sort of put that in context for young people watching, 1995, there's such an interesting era in terms of what you would see in the mainstream media of films and television and songs and whatnot, because the internet was only just burgeoning then.
Yeah.
It was kind of had happened in the US, and it was then people were discovering the web in 94, 95, 96, which means what we saw in mainstream media echoed some of the cyber world things happening. And sometimes it didn't echo it, because obviously Ghost in the Shell is its own thing. But I always think about, this film came out in 95 as we were just thinking about and experiencing connectivity and the web and privacy and security and data and all this sort of thing. So I think that's something we'll end up talking about as well, is the context of the film.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you're right. At the time, when this came out, I wasn't even at university. I was finishing my high school, the last year of high school, just before going to university. And, I would go to the internet on a cyber cafe. For those young people listening right now, we used to go to these places where you would pay per hour to go to the internet, which is a really strange thing. I think that there's still cyber cafes in the world. I've seen some, but this was the only way. I didn't have internet in my house. I had to go to this place. I couldn't connect in my own home. Never had really an internet connection until much later,
That's how old Hugo and I are. So, and of course, I should say that Ghost in the Shell, the film, is based on manga made in the late 80s, I think, and early 90s. So, the internet wasn't even a thing as it was talking about its topics, which are very correct and futuristic and crazily on point in terms of the cyber world, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, it's like a very dystopian future, and it's very bleak and very dark, but it has such a staple. Both the manga was so important, and then the film as well, to establish all this universe, which then led to The Matrix and led to all those other films that we then saw later on. I think it really led the way. This film, for me, it was the first time that I've ever heard of manga. It was the first time I've ever heard of anime.
Wow.
Because of course some people at the time already knew Akira, but manga and anime was not something that would come out of Japan. People, of course there were, a lot of people that knew about it, but it was an incredibly niche thing. It was something that only really, certain people in the world actually watched and read, and a lot of it never came from Japan because it was in Japanese. You couldn't even read it, and you couldn't even watch it because it was not translated, it was not dubbed. And I think Akira opened the door for opening all these films in, because that was the first mainstream success of a manga movie. But then this one really cemented, and you see that because the film, when it came out, it had it had a really polished dubbing version in America, and it came out as a theatrical release in the United States as well. And then it was a huge hit on VHS when it came out. And that's how I first saw it. We always talk about the experience that we first had when I first saw the film. That was my experience. I bought the VHS tape on a company in Portugal called Fnac, which is like this big DVD and VHS store that they have all over Portugal. It's a French company, but they also have it in Portugal. So that was my first experience, was just watching it in 4:3 pen and scan on a VHS tape. Wow. That was it. That was the first time I ever saw it.
I did not see this film when it first came out, but after The Matrix, and I only recently remembered this, Hugo, actually. After The Matrix, there were a bunch of film festivals, including in Australia, because The Matrix was filmed here, that tapped into what you might describe as cyberpunk, cybernetics, cyber world things. And that they would typically show The Matrix, Dark City, another Keanu film, Johnny Mnemonic.
Oh, yeah, that's it.
And Ghost in the Shell.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. That it was sort of, they just went around showing those kinds of films. I'm not even sure Dark City fit into that well, but they definitely
had the
coupled that
aesthetic,
together.
I guess it had the aesthetic. That was it. The darkness and the color scheme. And I know what you mean.
That was the first time I saw it, and then years later have seen the 2017 one, and then recently rewatched this 95 anime. Interestingly, I'm actually not 100% sure which version I recently rewatched, because they redid some of Ghost in the Shell, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah, so the 95 version, which is the original version, I saw that in VHS at the time, and there is like a 4K Blu-ray, a really good one. I'll talk a bit later about that. I have them here, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that. But the re-release, which was called the Ghost in the Shell 2.0, that was like basically, I think it was like 7 or 8 years after, and I watched that as well when it came out. I think it was already on the DVD, and it's basically the same film. It's just that they've made several sequences in full CG, and so it doesn't look as good because the CG is very dated, and so the CG doesn't really hold up to the standards that we have now in CG. I think the original 2D version holds up much better. But yeah, they did re-release, with all the crave of CG at the time. I think people really wanted to see that kind of film. And so they tried to update the movie a little bit, but it never really was as successful as the original. Not to confuse people with Ghost in the Shell 2, which exists as well. There is a sequel, which is called Ghost in the Shell 2 Innocence, which is a really good movie as well. But it's a very different movie, very, very... It's like a cyber noir detective story with some really strange plot twists and really dreamy sequences at some point, So which is really interesting, know.
But let's talk about what our reaction to Ghost in the Shell is or was, Hugo. I will jump in first and say I love the fact that this is a really beautiful looking painterly film full of long conversations. This film is actually pretty dry in some ways. But of course you can think about that a completely different way and think of it as poetry.
Yeah.
Poetry about the state of the world, the universe, and the state of, I keep saying cyber, but I think it is the way we're all connected digitally. It's a bit of a hard slog, this film, if you're really trying to listen to the conversations and like follow along. I had remembered it as being so much more actiony and a lot more, propelling along. I still completely loved it. I seriously loved this film. But oh my God, it is a real Japanese anime film full of dissection of the human condition, is how I would put it.
Japanese rhythm, it's a tough thing to swallow. Interestingly, I just recently watched the movie in 35 millimeter. I saw a projection of the original 35 millimeter. So I was in Portugal at the time. I was in vacation in Portugal with Anna. And we noticed that the Portuguese Cinematheque, which is like the official archive of cinema in Portugal, they were broadcasting the movie because of its anniversary. And so they picked up the 35 millimeter original print that came out in Portugal in 95. So we went to see it. It was like 9 in Portugal, everything is light. So it was like almost 10 o'clock in the morning, in the evening. And we had dinner, and then we went to see this film, and it was so hard to watch it, man. I was almost falling asleep, and Anna fell asleep, and we were just like dying in the cinema watching this movie. Like, and I don't get me wrong, I love Ghost in the Shell, but it has not aged particularly well. Like, it is a very slow film. And
it's a slow film.
It's incredibly complex, and you have to like really be attentive. And I think you have to have like a Red Bull before you watch it. It is just like it's almost like a philosophical thing. And I think when I was younger, I was at art school. I was arty-farty, and I had much more patience to these things, and I was reading philosophy, and I was reading artistic books, and I thought that was the best thing ever. I thought the movie was like the best movie ever made. I think my opinion has changed a little bit. I think the movie is like a technical achievement, but this last time I watched it as an older person, like I felt it was a bit more difficult to watch it this time. I think it was just not the same as when I saw it when I was younger. I think also we've changed. The films are faster now. Films have different rhythms. It's been 30 years. It's been a long time. So I think things although the film is quite short, it's only an hour and 20. It's a really short film, but it feels forever.
like 3.
It's because of the conversation. I think it's because of that. It's because of
and look, isn't that interesting to think about in the context of The Matrix, which I know the Wachowskis basically said we want to make a live action Ghost in the Shell, so not quite like that, but for The Matrix, where some people's criticism of The Matrix is, didn't we just have the world's most incredible stunt scene, and then now you want to just have this conversation with 2 characters? And of course, I think that they do that perfectly in The Matrix in terms of the time and the pacing of the film. But it's definitely a heavy influence on. We're not just going to show big action sequences in The Matrix. We're going to debate the human condition and talk about things and have characters with meaning, and I'm glad they didn't go full Ghost in the Shell with The Matrix. But it sounds like I'm totally digging into Ghost in the Shell here, but it is what you just said. You have to concentrate if you really want to take away a lot of the meaning and a lot of the plot points.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just have to turn your brain off and kind of remember what the film's about.
And you have to watch the movie multiple times as well. I think it's one of those movies because you pick up different things when you watch it. I just recently watched it again. They released the 4K restoration of the film. They made like a full restoration, scanned the original 45 scans and made a completely new version. And I watched it again and I noticed new things which I didn't really knew before. I think you were talking about the topics and the things about the movie. The film is like amazing in that sense. Like the whole thing about the ghost inside the robot and the entire conversation about modifications and cybernetic enhancements and the hacking thing. That's an amazing plot thing, where people get hacked and they will be changed. Their minds will be changed, or they can just lose their conscience completely. We even see that more on the second film, even more than that, where people have full hallucinations and don't even know where they are because they're being hacked. And also like this entire being in the cloud, because they don't say the word cloud during the movie, but that the villain of the movie, this being that is trying to control, it is really a cloud thing. It's like everywhere. It's on this network, and they keep talking about network. So these concepts at the time were so novel to us, and I don't think we fully understood them then. We really have the language to understand them now, although there are certain things that didn't really... The film is supposed to be set in 2030, so we're not far off. But we're getting there. But a lot of the things didn't really happen that way. I think the cyber enhancements and also the merging of technology with cybernetics, that never really happened. There's a lot of films like that where we have people's will complete replaced arms and cybernetic limbs and cybernetic lungs, and that really, we never really went that way in humanity, I think. So that is a different spin into it's like a different thread that kind of went another way, and I don't think we are going that way, really, to be honest. I think we are not really. I don't know how that happened, because so many films are with this, but that didn't really happen.
Well, the recent one is Alita, Battle Angel, isn't it?
Which also is very, I'm assuming it's very inspired by Ghost in the Shell as well. It is.
Yeah. I mean, a film doesn't have to get its premonitions correct.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that it's interesting.
Yeah.
At the time in the 90s, like, we were all thinking about this. There were so many books written about transhumans, and books written about cyber world, and books written about cybernetic hacking. And it's funny how it was really a big thing at the time in the 90s and in the 2000s. Things just became different, and it is truly special to see this alternative reality that kind of like could have happened, but it kind of didn't. And I feel like and there's also other things that I think are really interesting. When I was watching the movie now, I started thinking much more about it at the time. the whole morality side of things, with the morality side of technology, of some people not wanting to be enhanced, some people wanting to be enhanced. That was something that I didn't really thought much about at the time. And also like the fluidity of the characters, the gender fluidity, and the androgynousness of the main character, and all of that is also really interesting to watch. I just feel that the film, you know, as much as we can say that it's a bit slow and it's sometimes difficult to watch, it's a masterpiece. I mean, come on, it's like a masterpiece of cinema. There's no denying, you know, like, and even the topics and the story and the whole thing, you know.
Just the ideas that it bothers to go to are also indicative of, I would say, Japanese filmmaking and anime. You know, they're as I keep saying, they're about the human condition.
Yeah.
And if you watch any other kind of anime series or films from the 90s, you see that. I always thought it was exposing kids to deeper, better ideas than some of the American films, you know, which I love. Yeah. But it was exposing younger audiences to much deeper, more meaningful things than they would see from Hollywood. So that was a good thing. The challenge was that's not what we were used to, and our attention spans probably weren't used to that either. And so sometimes the success of, like, the impact of that wasn't as much as it might have been to Japanese kids or younger generations.
I know what you mean. Yeah. But it's funny, isn't it? Because The Matrix really taps into that, where The Matrix talks about philosophy in a much more easier way, and it became much more broad. You know, it became much more watched by everyone. It was a much more mainstream movie than Ghost in a Shell, really, to be honest. And that's why it was such a big hit. But without Ghost in a Shell paving that way, The Matrix really couldn't really have conceived these really, really high level concepts that they were trying to transmit on the film. And I think that's the thing. It's what you said. Like, these high concepts are really fantastic because it makes kids and young people like really think about these topics, and then maybe some of them will then go deeper and then go and read more things and then go into those kind of topics. I think that's what The Matrix did as well. Like they really managed to give like a lot of people new ideas to think about, as this film made as well. This film is like 4 years before The Matrix, but that entire decade is filled with those kind of films, you know, I think.
Yeah. And I'm not going to say something that people don't already realize, but manga and anime often deal with adult concepts that other Western media shy away from for whatever reason, prudish reasons, just a cultural difference, right? And I've always been intrigued by that, you know, that kids seem to access a lot more kind of adult concept material in Japan and Korea, say. In Ghost in the Shell, you can't walk away without saying the Major is sexy and has a sort of, there's that side of it that is just part of her character, right? And I mean, they definitely made the 2017 character sexy. It's Scarlett Johansson, right? But, you know, like, that's pretty bold. And it's definitely part of the world that Major has to live in, you know, of men mostly. And it's images of robots that men have created.
Yeah.
I'm trying to tiptoe around it a little bit, but I'm just saying it's just there. That's the film. It doesn't hint at it. That's just what it is.
Yeah.
You know, so...
Well, it has a lot to do with the Japanese culture, really, which also has a lot of powerful men, and it's always been a bit like that. But going back to, you're absolutely right. The topics and the level of high-level concepts which happen here, happen in Akira, and also happen in Evangelion as well, which is one of my favorite TV shows ever.
Oh my God.
I think Japanese culture, they make anime for all ages, and that is, I think, the biggest. It's not as much now. I think people have now respected anime, and they've respected modern and adult animation. But I think for a long time, especially in the 80s and the 90s, animation was considered for kids. And so it took, of course, I know we had The Simpsons and then we had Family Guy, but it was always for kids. It was always considered for kids. And then Pixar just cemented that entire world. Japanese animation has never been like that. They've always had a gigantic amount of adult animation, and they even have sex movies in manga. They even have racy films, plus 18 films.
Exactly.
They've always done that. And I think Western society has never done that. We never really had animation with sex or animation with deep philosophical questions or very heavy violence or very heavy action-driven movies. We never did that. There's so few examples of animations that do that. We have a lot of comedy, which is adult. That's true, with Family Guy and there's so many animations that now paved that way. But I just think it's a different universe. They just consume comic books and manga and animation in a different way from Western society. But this movie broke that barrier. I think that this and Akira really opened the floodgates. And now we have a huge manga audience in the West, to a point that we have Japanese animation movies in the cinema. We have them on the cinema all the time. We even have them being released theatrically, So
yes, and getting huge box office in America very recently. Yeah. So that's been great, And then, frankly, the advent of streaming services means that we watch them.
Netflix and Crunchyroll really changed the thing, especially Crunchyroll. That company really changed the world in terms of animation and manga. And then when Sony bought it, and then it became even bigger, because then it became part of Sony Pictures and then became part of Sony PlayStation, and it just becomes even bigger. I think it's without a doubt the biggest streaming, but Netflix had a really big play on that as well. Netflix have always been releasing anime content for a long, long time. Yeah. Both TV shows, films, even making new ones, with Castlevania, which was an amazing TV show that they've made. They've been trying to tap into that market.
Yeah, totally. Can we talk about the look of 1995 Ghost in the Shell?
Yep.
I think I said to you a few weeks ago, Hugo, I would put up a frame from the movie as a picture in my house, in my apartment.
I think many people do.
Some of the paintings, like the animation backgrounds, but also the character animation, are just so beautiful. Of this Japanese city, its weathered apartment blocks, its signage, city. I could stare at it for hours, and I think I did during the film. I possibly was distracted from the movie, from the story, because of the beautiful backgrounds. And there's a bunch of anime films that do this, and Akira, you already mentioned, is another one. But gosh, this is such a beautiful, painterly looking film, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But it's funny that you mentioned Akira, because this film, it touches much more on the backgrounds because it has so much less editing. The film, you were talking about Akira. I've discovered recently that Akira is a film with over 2,000 cuts. It has over 2,000 scenes. And this movie only has 600 shots. And so it's a much more slow-paced, much more longer takes. And you take the backgrounds in a much longer way. In fact, I think my favorite part of the movie is these intermissions. It's not intermissions, but it's like these moments which you have this beautiful music. The soundtrack is absolutely amazing. You have the soundtrack really punching up, and then you just see people walking, and you see airplanes, you see the buildings, and you see like cars going through, and sometimes she's on the river and she's on the boat, and then you just see more planes flying, and then more buildings, and you see the flappings and the lights coming up. There's like at least 3 sections in the movie that have these long 2-3 minute long sequences of just the environment, which becomes they become a character on the movie. I think it's just amazing, those sequences, Yeah,
and like bold, right? Now it's
bold.
already bold that the film is is a discussion piece
Yeah.
between the characters sometimes. But to have these meandering, and they sometimes are,
Yeah.
landscapes, is like it gives you some time to think about what's just happened. It gives you some thinking time to go, oh, what is the meaning of this sort of long, slow piece of the film? It's actually a bit of a live action trope as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I would say that we've already talked about it, that the Matrix team wanted to emulate this film in their film. But I would say that the creators of Ghost in the Shell wanted to make it feel like a live action film.
Yeah, they did.
Right?
They did. Absolutely.
That's clear.
And that has to do with how it was even made. But I shout out to the soundtrack. The soundtrack is absolutely amazing, and you can find it anywhere. You don't have to have the CD. I have the CD, but you can find it on streaming. You can find it on Apple Music. You can find it on Spotify. It's from Kenji Kawaii, and the both soundtracks of first and the second movie are just like outstanding pieces of work. And they also are really... They really are parts of the fabric of this movie. I think without this soundtrack, the movie wouldn't have even sound or look like this. It's so funny that you were like starting this conversation with having them on the wall, because the Blu-ray has a lot of extras, of course, as films do from this time. They show everything, and they have all the behind the scenes. They don't really shy on that. And there's an entire piece of this museum archivist from the Netherlands, and he has a bunch of background painting cells on the wall, like actual cells from the movie, like layered cells that are painted on transparent plastic so they can be layered and photographed. And he went to the original animation studio to go and visit the archives and see these layers. And so there's this really beautiful, really nice documentary it's a small little 15-minute documentary on the Blu-ray where they show the cells and they show the original paintings, and they're really massive. They're like A4s and A0s, A2s. They're really big pieces of paper, and sometimes they're painted on transparent cellophane and celluloid, and they're paintings. They're literally paintings. They're beautifully intricate paintings. And you were talking about the photography method. That's kind of how they were really created. That's a great segue to actually talk about how this film was made. And so when they went around to try to start this movie, of course, Ghost in the Shell doesn't exist. This place doesn't exist. And so they went to Hong Kong, and of course they used Japan as well, and Tokyo and Kyoto and a lot of different places. And they went around and took a lot of pictures. They took a bunch of photos. They took extensively a lot of photos in color, but also a lot of photos in black and white, so they can have the tracing and the lines of these really massive metropolitan cities of Hong Kong and Tokyo. And the funny thing is that they also, while that process was happening, they also did really strange techniques to get the bloom and the glow of the lights that you see on the movie. And so the way they did it was they went with these 35 millimeter cameras, because it wasn't digital, it was real film. They were taking photos in the street, and they would go to these really warm rooms, stay there with the lens, and then walk right out on a cold night, so the lens would fog up. And so the lens would completely fog up because of the temperature, which is one of the worst things you can do on lenses. But they did it in purpose, just so it can fog up a lot. And then they waited for it to all fully fog up, took a bunch of pictures, and then they actually went and actually used some of the glows and some of the flares they got from the glows and actually painted them and superimposed them on top of the paintings. And so some of them are actually real photography elements that they've actually painted and sometimes even just merged into the painting that they were making in the backgrounds. It's a really skillful process. And these paintings are, as the director describes, they were on this process of making them. And normally in manga, backgrounds are quite simple. They're not very detailed because it's all about just going faster and making the film. But they really were intricate. He was constantly giving the painters the notes, like, just put more detail and put more detail. Just go ahead and put even more. And so these paintings are so detailed. They have all these little signs, and then they have these little windows, and then they have these little bricks and little lines coming out of the windows, and they're so detailed. They become almost a piece of photo. They become a photographic representation of a city that doesn't exist. I just thought that just those backgrounds were just like absolutely amazing, and the methodology behind them of layering and painting and then scanning them, of course, and it's just amazing.
Yeah,
you know?
It's funny because I've in Ghost in the Shell and other Japanese anime films, I always thought these cities that they represent, that can't be what it looks like over there. And when I first went to Hong Kong, oh my gosh, there are parts of that city that feel like Ghost in the Shell, because clearly that's what it's based on.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's just how these cities built up over time. You were talking about techniques, Hugo, in terms of how the film was made. That the mid-90s was still very much, you know, although Toy Story was released that year as well.
Yeah.
Still very much cell animation was a thing. But Ghost in the Shell did kind of introduce a lot of digital workflows, right? For how the pieces were combined, but also how shots were done.
This film was actually a huge turning point for Japanese animation. This was a film the director and the team really took digital computers and digital softwares with open arms, and they just took it all in. And they were not shy about that. This was, of course, on a moment where Japanese companies and Japanese animation, the community was really against digital. They were really against. They didn't want it. A little bit of a similar feeling that we have now with AI, of course, but they did not. They thought, you know, there's no way we can do this digitally. It has to be painted by hand. It has to be done this way. And this director and his team really did not do that. They just embraced all the technology. And so this film was, yes, painted with pencil layers and color layers and movement of layers for parallax, like they usually do with these. They have the Blu-ray is really good. They have these really amazing documentaries where they even show the light tables where they put the camera and then they have the layers moving up and down, and they photograph them frame by frame. They have all that process, but they also went in and digitized the whole thing as well. And they actually did a lot of compositing at the time. This is also present on. I'll put some footage, historical footage of this while we're talking. This is done with Silicon Graphics, of course, with Indigo 2s. You can see a bunch of them on the studio. And it's mostly Softimage, XSI Ice as well, and a software which was based in Ice, which was called Timma, which doesn't really exist. It was like, as far as I understood, because I couldn't find much information about it except this documentary. As far as I understood, Timma was basically a part of Ice in the very beginning, but then Ice became just Ice, and it never really had that name again. But this was how they made. It started as the displacement for the camouflage effect. You know, that was kind of the first idea to do that, because that couldn't really be done in animation. That's how they started. But then they slowly started using depth, you know, started blurring backgrounds to make depth of field. They started parallaxing layers in the compositing application inside of Softimage and these Indigo 2s. They even then started doing something that never happened in manga movies. They started doing, some of these shots have lens distortion. You can see the bowing of lenses on them. Those are not drawn. They actually are distorted in these softwares. And so this is also one of the first times where they involved digital computer doing barrel distortion of lenses, parallaxing animation, and then even the camouflage effect is really advanced. When you look at their screens, you immediately know what they were doing. They were doing these depth maps that were created with very rudimentary CG of these 2D animations, and then using the depth maps on top of the 2D drawing to displace it to make the camouflage. So this is really like groundbreaking stuff happening on this movie that has never been done before. You know, of really, and when you look at the movie, you don't even think about it, you don't even notice it, you just think it's a 2D movie. That's it. Like it, and it is amazing. That was and that was intentional, of course, so that no one really, batted an eye on that. But also, it allowed them to do much longer takes. It allowed them to turn around shots much faster. Not to mention, they edited them on the AVID system as well, which was also unheard of. They edit the thing on a digital platform as well. So the turnaround was so much faster for them to preview things and to test things. When you see them talk, because these interviews are historical, they're interviews from 95, they are really talking like this is the future. And they're like talking about something new. It's so funny to see because they're like talking about AVID as something that just came out.
Yes, but I always like to see things like this where it turns out lots of different companies and countries were using some of these tools in the early to mid 90s. Sometimes we do get a bit obsessed with thinking it's just Hollywood productions that pioneered this stuff. And look, they did. I mean, Toy Story is incredible, but previously Disney feature animation had been slowly putting in and using digital tools, and they made their way into Lion King in 94 and, a few earlier films than that, in terms of both CG characters and scenes, but also digital workflows. But if you look around and see other companies and countries, they were also implementing digital workflows early on, right? And so Ghost in the Shell is definitely an example.
It's cool what you just said, because it's the fact that we didn't really have the robust internet we have today or the social media platforms we have today. And so I'm not entirely sure all these companies really knew which they were doing each other.
I don't think they did.
No, I mean, some of them might, if they would go to a festival together, if they would go to a... I'm assuming SIGGRAPH already existed, didn't it? In the 90s, I think it did already.
Absolutely. And that is where a lot of things got shared.
Yeah, exactly.
But also new approaches and new technologies back then were highly guarded, because it was your point of difference from one studio to the next. So it's possible they, kept them under wraps a little bit.
Exactly. And it, of course, then it came out when the Blu-ray was out, and because the documentaries were so open about it, but the film was out already, so it didn't really matter anymore. But I think it's remarkable to see how they developed this really painstakingly methodology. Funny enough, they have a name for it. It's not called CGI. They have a completely new name that I've never heard in my life, which is called DGA. And this stands for Digital Generated Animation. And they keep talking about DGA all the time on the documentary. In the future, DGA will be a thing. In the future, DGA will be this and DGA will be that. They just keep saying DGA like 20 times on the documentary. This is the first time ever in my life I've heard of digitally generated animation.
Well,
it's so funny.
It might be as simple as trying to get audiences and producers and the filmmakers to realize that we're not painting on cells anymore.
Yeah, and it's the different. I think it's to differentiate from Pixar from CGI. Because it was digitally generated animation, and so it's like it's still animation, so it's like 2D. But it's digitally generated, so it's not 3D. I think they were trying to differentiate themselves from 3D,
Well, I don't remember the exact timelines, but just remember also Disney feature animation, the big company making the money from Aladdin and Beauty and the Beast and Lion King, as well as Disney was related to Pixar, of course, at the time. They had something called CAPS, which was made by Pixar. Yeah. And CAPS was kind of not really one tool. It was a workflow for, bringing cells into the computer and doing lots of other things, by the way, cataloging, So maybe that DGA
it could be
was a response to we've heard about this CAPS thing. I don't know.
Yeah, but it is funny.
Someone could tell us.
It's funny to watch these behind the scenes that are so old. They're 30 years old, because they also don't talk about editing. They just call it AVID. We've AVID this. We've AVID this. It's like they talk about the word like if it's a verb, which is so funny as well. But the revolution of using AVID to edit manga is like really revolutionized, because imagine for them to think that they don't have to go to a moviola to actually play it back, or they don't have to like scroll the papers to watch the animation. They just can just play it, and it's
huge.
The editor keeps talking about it. Well, and I can also go to just the beginning and watch the first shot, and like he's like talking about it like it's like something so cool. But having said this, there is CG on the movie as well. There is CGI in the movie as well. There's all these holograms. There's also the maps, which are all 3D. There's also this really beautiful intro with the CG scan, the CG brain scan that slices. So you have the brain, you have the holograms, you have the screens as well. There's actually a lot of CG in the movie. I think several minutes of CG done in the movie.
Totally.
Like real 3D, not animation.
Which I would describe as less successful as I wanted it to be. And partly that's because it's 1994 they were making it, right? So we can't expect too much. But there was this challenge in some of those films of the 90s where the 2D painterly look was combined with a CG clean look. It's not so bad in Ghost in the Shell because it's a bit more graphic in nature, those holograms or the
it's like motion graphics almost.
Yeah. But I always remember this period in filmmaking where they took advantage of 3D models, and put them into a 2D animated film, and it always didn't blend that well, for a while. So
I think it's also like it has to also be, has to do with the fact. Remember, we were talking about the second movie. I think that's why it's not so successful, because CG was lacking proper reflections. It was lacking proper GI. It was lacking proper global illumination. It just didn't look right. Yeah. The skin didn't look right. The textures didn't look right. It was just not there at that time. And I think that's why but this one, I think they were quite smart because it's mostly motion graphics happening on the film. When you watch the 4K Blu-ray, you really see the difference because you're watching these pristine scans of the real paper painting that they had at the time with the backgrounds and the foregrounds, and even the composites, because they were very high resolution composites done very painstakingly, rendered very slowly. But then when you cut to the motion graphic scenes like the maps and the brain scan, it looks really bad. Like it's really pixelated. Really, it looks like PAL footage, like because it was rendered in like, I don't know, 720p probably, and then scanned to film, and then you see the pixels on it. It doesn't hold up as well, So
yeah. Okay, I want to leave some time to talk about the new film, but Hugo, you have amassed a few Ghost in the Shell things, like the Blu-ray and other things. I think some of those are behind you.
Yeah, they are.
What have you got there?
The only thing I don't have here is the books. The books, which I don't think it's relevant for our discussion because it's just the films. But I just wanted to give a little heads up, really short heads up to people if they want to get into this universe, because there's so much. You have like this movie, you have the book, you have this movie, then you have the sequel, then you have the TV show, then you have a second TV show, then you have a third TV show, and then you have a fourth TV show that is now out as well. There's even a TV show from 2 years ago or something like that. So I just wanted to give a little heads up of how people can start. I think the best way that they should start all of this is with the original manga, at least the first volume. I think the second volume is not as well received and it's not as good, but the first volume is really good. And you can find it on Amazon, translated completely. I think it's £20 or something. It's quite cheap. But I would really highly recommend the Blu-ray. This is the 4K Blu-ray. This version is the original version without the enhancements that they made at the time. It also has the American version as well and the Japanese version. It has an audio commentary with the American people, like, philosophers, reviewers, historians. It's a really nice audio commentary to watch. So I would say people should really look into that. I would really recommend the second film, which is this one, Ghost in the Shell, Innocence. This is a really good movie. It's a really good movie. And in fact, it was so good that it was even on Cannes Films Festival for the competition. It's really good. This is not so good. I don't really recommend this. The package brings both of the films. This is the one you were talking about, the 2.0 version, which is a bit hit and miss. I don't know, like, but it's quite cheap, you know, like, and when you buy one, you get the other one. So it's fine. I mean, you can just keep them and never watch the other one. Now, what I really would like to advise people is this. Now, not a lot of people know that there's a really good TV show called Standalone Complex. This is a TV show, 2 seasons. I think it's like 50 episodes, 20 minutes each. A lot of the stuff that you see on Scarlett Johansson's movie comes from this TV show. In fact, like the film, which is a lot of people call it the bastardization of Ghost in the Shell. The reason for that is because it has little pieces of this TV show, it has little pieces of The Innocents, and it has little pieces of the original. And so people hate that they've mushed 3 different things in that, you know. And then, of course, if you want a sequel to this TV show, the Standalone Complex, you have the sequel to it, which is the Solid State Society. And that is it. I don't recommend anything else after this. This is from 2011, I think. Everything else that came out after that is shit. It's like really bad, like really poor animation, poor film, like just not worth your time. And of course, the soundtrack. I really would advise people to listen to the soundtrack. This is a special edition I bought in Japan when I went there a few years back. It has like 2 discs. It has like an interview and everything. And then, of course, last but not least, if you want to know more about the original film from the actual the film we're going to talk about now, which is this one, the one you love, which is this one, the Scarlett Johansson Ghost. There is also Cinefx to go with it if you want to learn more about it. This is a really nice article, about the movie. The last thing I'm going to show, which is actually better than the movie, is this book. This is actually really good. This is the art of the movie, not of the animation. Very good book. Filled with behind the scenes. You know, very rarely they have behind the scenes on these books. They just have concepts. No, this one has behind the scenes. It has green screens. It has actual footage of the behind the scenes. I think it was made on the time where they still wanted to show those things, and they still kept. I think they still kept the green screens, and then didn't make them gray. So it's funny. This book is a bit old now. So I have like, I guess, the starter pack for you to go into Ghost in the Shell.
I love it.
But
I love it.
Now we're going to talk about what you would say, this piece of crap, right? This is what we're going to talk about now.
I feel terrible saying that. I would never say that as a whole about the film, because so many great people worked on it, of course, including practical effects and digital visual effects teams. The challenge is you're going from this beloved, clever, deep source material into something that I walked away from 2017 Ghost in the Shell not feeling like it was a Ghost in the Shell film.
Yeah.
And that was bad, because you would hope that they have captured the essence of it, in the live action film. And they just didn't. And I was thinking this morning, Hugo, why wasn't it? And there's a lot of reasons. But do you know one reason? The 2017 film is not funny. It does not have some of the sly humor that sometimes comes between Major and the other characters having a bit of a riff in the original.
Yeah.
Like that's really apparent.
They tried. There is a bit of an attempt, but it never really lands.
Doesn't work.
Doesn't land. Yeah, it doesn't land.
It doesn't land.
And the villain also doesn't really land that well as well.
The villain doesn't land.
Yeah.
I hated the way they deal with the tank at the end. I just hated it. Hated it.
Well,
but what I really like about the film, I really like Scarlett Johansson. I really, really do. And I think there's something about her performance that I like.
Yeah.
But the problem is she wasn't made to be humorous. As you say, she tried.
She tried with Baku. They try, both of them, to have some moments, but it doesn't really work out as well.
That's my main thing that I don't think works, which could have given the film a bit more of a, this is clever. This is clever. and it just wasn't. So
I mean, the film, the problem is that, having watched the TV show and having watched the sequel and the film, I know so much about Ghost in the Shell when I'm watching that movie, the Scarlett Johansson movie. I'm like, okay, I understand what they were trying to do. They were trying to make the entire universe in one film, and so, they have, that doctor that has the cigarette butts and she has the eyes coming in and out. That's from the TV show, and then,
right.
The dogs are from the sequel, that's from the sequel. And then you watch, and that villain is actually not that villain. It's a mixture of a villain of the second season and the villain of the actual animation. It's all like a pastiche of a bunch of things that they've merged together from the universe. I think Rupert Sanders, he's a good director and is talented, and his team was very talented. But I think they went too far. I really like the movie. I like the movie because it's a visual spectacle. That's why I watch the movie and I only am looking at the graphics. That's the thing. It's like I'm watching a good game. It is a good graphical game. It is just by the looks. It's a film that really only serves for me as the look of anything. I think from the script point of view, I think they've put in too many things. There's too many plots. There's too many conversations. There's too many things in it. There's not enough deepness into the discussions because they're trying to show everything. I don't know what happened. I don't know if they were afraid of not having a sequel, which they didn't. So it never really happened. But I don't know why they tried to cram in every fucking thing from Ghost in the Shell in one single movie, and they didn't need to. And also, I think also people, but there is something I wanted to say. I think people are very unkind to this movie because they are expecting this to be a remake of the animation, and this is not a remake of the animation. This film is this is an adaptation of the manga and an adaptation of the universe.
Sure.
So it's a film about Ghost in the Shell. It's a film about the universe of Ghost in the Shell. To the fact, in the end of the movie, Major continues to be Major, which is what happens on the TV show, not on the film, on the animation film, because she becomes part of the web, becomes part of the cloud, not on the movie, of course. So I think the movie, unfortunately, I think at the time everyone was just expecting to watch a live action version of this animation that came out in 95, which is a beloved movie. And that was not what people got. And I think people got disappointed. People got incredibly disappointed. The film was very badly received. I remember. People didn't like it. Didn't like the movie at all. And it didn't set the world on fire. It didn't really work out for them,
No.
Yeah.
I also have an interesting relationship with this 2017 film from a visual effects point of view, Hugo. So this is a film that I had to write the first cover story for the first issue of the VES's magazine VFX Voice.
Oh wow!
So that they started making this magazine, and this was the cover story, for the first issue that came out. Now, I had to do a whole bunch of interviews without having seen the film. It kind of happens sometimes because, there's a long lead in until the magazine comes out. And sometimes you get to see a really early screening of the film and sometimes you just don't. I was really lucky to do interviews with the director, Rupert Sanders. John Dykstra was a visual effects supervisor on it.
Yeah.
Guillaume Recheron, sorry if I've mispronounced your name, but he was at MPC at the time. I think I talked to Weta Workshop.
Yeah, you probably talked to Richard Taylor probably as well.
Richard Taylor, legend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of legends on this movie. A lot of legends on this movie.
Oh my God. And because they shot in New Zealand, that was kind of cool too. But I've fumbled my way through those interviews based on stuff I did know. And I really enjoyed writing the story. But it never helps to not having seen the film,
of course,
when you're covering it. And then, to get the cover story of this new magazine, that was kind of cool too. But yeah, so that was my history with the film. I don't think I lied to any of them and say that I'd seen the film and thought it was great. So I was just able to deal with that and not have to talk about it. And actually, there's some pretty cool visual effects things in the film. I always thought the holograms, which I think they call solograms,
Yeah.
sort of were quite effective, and they had some new techniques to do that at the time in terms of
Yeah,
capturing.
you're talking about the camera array, right? Like the 80 camera array, where they capture the volume, which is volume capture, which is very early for volume capture, really.
Yeah, volumetric 4D volumetric capture
Yeah.
was quite early at the time.
Yeah. I have a note here. It's a company called Digital Air that made that from Switzerland, that made that array of volume capture, which is, yeah. And by the way, like, if you guys want to know more about the behind the scenes and the visual effects, they're all on the Blu-ray. So this is one of those movies where you actually know about it and it's not hidden and it's all there. So if you go to the Blu-ray, it doesn't have much, but it has some stuff. I feel like the film, like I said, like I think the film tried too hard to mush everything together. I'm not comparing it to Stranger Things, but I feel like it suffers the same thing from Stranger Things, where they tried to put all these influences and all these things in one single thing. And I can see already, you know, I'm imagining Rupert probably watched all the mangas and watched all the animations, all the films, all the TV shows, watched everything. And then it was just in overdrive trying to put everything on the movie. And it sometimes I think you shouldn't watch everything. I think you can't put everything in, and I think that's the problem. But having said that, I love the movie because the movie looks fantastic. That beginning is amazing. It's beautiful when she comes into the restaurant through the glass, and the whole presence of Scarlett Johansson is amazing. The holographic effect, her suit, it's just. Even the bad guy, cause I like the way his face moves around, and I love Toshiro Kitano is on this movie. I can't believe he's there, like on the movie as well. He's like, it is amazing that he's on the movie, and I love this thing that he speaks in Japanese and they all answer, like they all know all the languages at the same time, which is amazing as well. I think the film has really cool stuff and cool moments, you know.
It does look cool.
Yeah.
And they have plenty of times to make it look cool, like Scarlett jumping out windows and emerging from water and being in water, you know, for that camouflage fight. There was some discussion at the time that this film looks incredible and has nothing to say. Right? And which is not, it's just again what shouldn't have happened with Ghost in the Shell.
Yeah.
Because it has a lot to say.
But you know,
interestingly, the film might have been made 5 years too early. If it came out in an AI world that we're in now,
yeah, I think so.
We would be talking about it probably very differently.
Yeah. And also, I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. If it was now, it probably would have taken the world by storm. And also, I think they should have made clear the messaging that it was not based on the animation. And I think that's the key thing. Everyone came in to try to see the animation being remade, and that was not the idea. This was not like the Disney animation movies like Lion King and Aladdin. It's not that. This is something else that they were trying to make. The funny thing is that, you know, the director of the animation, of the original anime, Mamoru Yoshi, he was on set a few times, right. And he was not involved, but he was on set visiting, and they brought him in and they talked with him, and it's so funny to see his interview. Like, he actually really likes the movie, and the fact that he likes the movie is because for him it's about different versions of this universe, and in the same way that he was talking on the interview saying, you know, the manga was one thing, that was the original, and then I made a movie, which is a very different thing from the animation, from the manga, which it is. The movie is much more slow and has a lot less action, and it's much more spiritual and philosophical. The manga has more action and it has less spiritualism. And then this version is an American Hollywood version of this story. And he really dig it. He really enjoyed it. And I feel like I like it because of that, because I like that I have all these versions and all these things and variants of Ghost in the Shell. It's like it's almost like you have a topic and then you have guest directors directing it. You know, it's almost like that. I like this idea, and I really wish that they made a sequel. I really think that they would have made a better movie if they made the second one. And it kind of, when you watch the movie, it feels like there was going to be a sequel. You feel that. because you see the ending, you see Major, and you see the entire team. And I'm assuming they would go to other stories and they would go to other plot lines, and there was other villains on the manga and there was other villains on the TV show as well, and other stories about hacking and other complete different plot lines that could have been done. Or they could have done things about the second movie, which is really interesting, the second movie, the way it talks about hacking the human brain and people having hallucinations and not knowing if they are in reality or not in reality. All those things are amazing topics, and it would have been a great sequel, but it never happened. I think the movie didn't do well enough for it to have a sequel. I think that was the problem, So
yeah. We probably say this quite a lot about some of the films we talk about, Hugo, which is, I would watch a Ghost in the Shell live action episodic series now.
Yeah, me too.
Because it's a detective story.
Yeah.
It's a detective
That's
story.
what the second movie is. It's a detective story.
Perfect for episodic. And, they can make these films, these episodic series with the use of different techniques now. They can build these environments, but they can shoot with LED walls if they need to. It kind of seems like it would suit that approach in some ways.
Absolutely.
Maybe it's in discussion. I don't know.
It could be.
But
this
I
movie
would probably watch that.
Yeah, because this movie is from 2017. It was shot in a more traditional way. A lot of blue screen, a lot of green screens, a lot of backlots, green screens, and a lot of green screen suit people. Like moving people around in wires, and especially the water scene where they're fighting the invisible Major. There's a lot of people with green leotards going around.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know what you mean. Like, I think I never thought about that. It's you really make a huge point, a really compelling point, that if it was now, would have been very different. And it wasn't that long ago. It's incredible, isn't it? It's only 8 years ago, and it's such a different world we live now. Such a different place in 8 years. It's incredible to think about that. Wow, 2017 is not even that long ago.
When the film was being made, I even recall one of the challenges of, they show a trailer or even a still from the film, and it was Scarlett in the white, Major costume. And maybe social media, it was big back then, social media, but there wasn't necessarily the uproar about how she looked different from the Major or whatnot, because it's Scarlett Johansson. She looks good. And Weta Workshop did incredible work on her costume, and so the costume department did as well. But I remember when the film finally came out, they said, it doesn't feel like Major, right?
Yeah.
And yet Scarlett was good. So one of the challenges I'm getting at is that you have a fan base of a film, right? There's a lot of people who've never seen the anime or have read the manga. They couldn't care less. But any filmmaker who wants to take on an existing remake, like a remake or existing property, just has that challenge of getting through the fan base.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Really hard.
Absolutely.
Really hard to do.
Absolutely.
So I applaud them for trying. Is my point.
I think you really reach the point there. It's about the fact that when you look at the original manga and you look at the original movie, it's highly sexual. It's very sexual, especially the manga. The manga has very sexual poses, and the Major is always in almost nothing. She's almost naked all the time, and even on the original animation, she is almost naked on a lot of places on the movie. When she takes before she goes to camouflage, she's naked. That's it. That never happens on the movie. Not that I think people were expecting Scarlett Johansson to be naked on the movie, but she has been naked on other movies. She's been naked in a lot of movies. If you look at Under the Skin, she's naked in a lot of parts in that movie. So I think maybe, I'm not saying that was what happened, but perhaps they didn't really tap in to the sexual nature of Ghost in the Shell.
I don't think they did at all. And it didn't mean that she needs to be naked.
No, but sexual
anime or manga
innuendo,
Yeah. Sometimes it does feel like it breaches some sort of line in anime.
You know, that's a different
but
thing.
often it's not gratuitous at all.
No, on the Ghost in the Shell,
they have different views about what that means. You know, I think, and I actually do think in Ghost in the Shell, her vulnerability is part of how Major as a character in the 95 movie works, which means seeing her skin, seeing you know that side of her is really important. It doesn't come across the same way.
No, because she has a
2017
suit,
film.
because she's on the bedroom and she actually has a normal human suit, human skin, and then she has another suit on top. So she looks very bulky. She looks like a tank almost. And it's just a different vibe to the movie. The other thing as well, the villain, both on the original movie, which is a woman, actually, it's a geisha, it's a sexual doll on the original movie, and then on the TV show, it's actually a geisha doll as well. The same geisha doll we see on the beginning of the live action movie, but on the TV show, that geisha is the hacked. Also on the sequel, that happens as well. There's all sorts of sexual tensions and the geishas and sensuality on all these stories. And you're right. Absolutely. I agree with you. Sometimes manga crosses the line, but they never crossed the line on the original Ghost in the Shell. They just barely showed things, but it was just enough to give it an atmosphere in a different sense, which makes sense because it's a robot. She doesn't really think about sex. She's a cyborg, and there's no sex there. Yeah. But she has a sexual body because that's a great way of infiltration, and it's a great way of doing missions because that's how it is.
Yes, and the whole point of it.
Exactly, that's the whole point. The Matahari effect. I feel like the movie failed on certain things. It failed on the villain. It failed on the representation of Major. But I think the biggest failure of the movie is trying to show three different things in one single movie. And I think I will end the list of failures I have with one thing. I think it's unforgiven for me that the music is not the music from the animation. I feel that was a mistake from the director because they made a really good soundtrack. It's nice, but it's a very normal Hollywood type action movie soundtrack. And the original soundtrack of Ghost in the Shell is a very cryptic and atmospheric and haunting soundtrack. And they could have just gotten the rights for it, or at least made something with it. I feel like the soundtrack is a part of this.
Or alluded to it, perhaps.
They do it. They do it just on the end credits. That's it. On the end credits, that music comes in. But it's not enough. Like, I feel like they lost the plot there because that music was part of this atmosphere. It was part of all of this. Yeah, so, like I said, I like the movie, but it has a lot of problems for me,
Yeah. Well, honestly, it's a really fun thing to watch the old movie and the new movie back to back. And of course, it's fun to watch those other in between things as well. And as much as I'm dissing the new movie, I love the challenge that must be in front of filmmakers and designers and the visual effects team to reimagine, pay homage. I'm interested in that. So they and as we always say, oh my God, the work in this film, the new film, is incredible, and we would never diss that work at all. But unfortunately, the story and just some of the decisions that were made don't work for me anyway in the new film. But it is an interesting challenge to how do you go from this animation classic to live action? It's hard. That's my big conclusion, Hugo.
Yeah, it is.
It's hard to do,
and very rarely is a success. I mean, I think from the last decades, wouldn't it be that Lion King is probably the only one that was really a success in that sense? I mean, I don't really know of a lot of successful animation to live action transitions. It's very rare if you think about it.
Well,
what are you gonna say now?
I'm gonna say The Lion King's successful in terms of making $1 billion live action. there's been some really interesting attempts recently. I mean, the Snow White this year was an interesting attempt, in my opinion. It just didn't work for lots of other reasons.
Watch that. I forgot about that. I've completely forgot about that movie.
Big movie from this year.
I completely forgot about it.
Yeah.
I think everyone forgot.
Yeah.
Is it even on the list, on the 10 list?
On the 20? No,
it's not even. Oh man! Wow, is it that bad?
Yeah.
No, it probably isn't.
No, it's not that bad, but it had a lot of things attached to it that didn't work. Yeah. We should probably do a whole nother season, Hugo, on animation to live action translations.
That's a really interesting season, actually. Yeah.
Can I just finish with one story about my article I wrote for VFX Voice that I've always been so bitter about. Oh my God.
Come on, man.
One of the things
wash it out
about
now.
In the magazine cover ended up being this diving Major Scarlett Johansson down the side of the building, and she's in a bit of a T pose.
Yeah.
It's kind of effective. But the image we chose was her smashing through the glass as a side-on view, which was like an on-set image that was captured, I think, and maybe in hand. Oh, who knows? But it was very effective of Scarlett, with a gun. And we said, that's the image we'd love to use. Is that okay? And they, the studio said, yes, no problem. And then they came back to us and said, oh, we've promised that image to another magazine to use.
My God.
And it was on a poster. It was also on a poster or whatever, but it's a very effective magazine. And so we couldn't use it. And I'm like, I was always so bitter about that because the other images were not as compelling.
That sucks.
So there you go.
The funny thing is that it wasn't Cinefx apparently, because they didn't even do it.
Oh, well,
they didn't even put Ghost in the Shell on the cover, so they didn't care.
But come on, that's a pretty cool image of Rocket Raccoon.
I know it is, but it is Scarlett Johansson. Come on. Like they would have sold more magazines probably if they had him on the cover. Do you know which magazine ended up with that image?
I probably could look through my emails and try and find out, but I won't. I better not.
That sucks,
say
man.
If I do that.
That sucks. No wonder you don't like the movie.
No, that's not the reason. All right, it's been fun talking about both those things, Hugo, and I certainly appreciate your devotion to understanding anime and the live action film, and all the stuff that you've collected and talked about.
It's worth it's worth the pickup, but it's hard to find though. By the way, it doesn't exist in streaming. You can't find the TV show. It's a bit weird that it's not available everywhere, and it is a bit weird. Yeah, this was fantastic. I love this season. I really love the films we picked. I think we picked some bangers. We picked this selection is some of the best movies that I really like. So I'm really enjoying doing this season with you.
Yeah, hope you've all enjoyed the rise of AI robots, and please keep any suggestions for future seasons coming in. Thank you so much, Hugo. Always fun to chat, and thanks everyone out there for listening.
Goodbye, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.